Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for parents who are looking to do a good job and to do it in a way that is pleasing to you and in line with the principles you give us. I pray that you would multiply our efforts, that we'd see success and be encouraged to keep at it when sometimes it's hard. I pray for strength and enthusiasm and tenacity, and that you would be glorified in all of our efforts. In Jesus' holy name, amen. Okay, well, let's talk manners, character, yes. So I actually love this topic, and before we get started, this is going to be like a high-level overview kind of thing, and I have some, I added to our resource list from last week. I have some resources that I think are real helpful, and so I put them there if you want to explore more in depth. But this will just be kind of a, an overview, and let me just add this disclaimer. I'm kind of sensitive because some people are like, manners, it's just so pretentious, and this isn't Downton Abbey, and no, it's not. But manners are the way that we demonstrate our love and care for people. And anyway, manners are the tool that we can teach our children to be able to show care, kindness to their friends, to their families. And so one of the other things I had listed on the list was executive skills. And I don't know if you're familiar with that term. It's like a buzzword for, these are the things your kids need to know to be successful. So I'm not interested in the success of our children except that they grow to be godly young men and women. But the executive skills I feel like are helpful for us to pay attention to and to incorporate into the things that we're teaching our kids. They're closely aligned with manners because I think they equip us to accomplish the purposes God has for us. And you'll see when we talk about it. And then the last thing was EQ as opposed to IQ. We were just talking about IQ alone is not a guarantee to satisfaction in life or a good Christian witness. But emotional quotient is our ability to recognize and regulate our own emotions and recognize and react to the emotions of another person. Empathy, that would be my way of saying it, to understand people and to therefore be able to show them love. Okay? Manners, I'm going to define, we're not going to talk about which fork to use. And although that is very valuable, Chris often tells the story. His dad was British, and he was very much into the table manners. And, as a kid, Chris thought, oh, brother. And at the same time, when he went off into the world, he was very confident in any situation because his dad had told him, what do you do with all the stuff on the table? But that's not exactly what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to talk more about just basic manners, just basic things. And this goes in tandem with proactively teaching our children the way we want them to behave. Proactively teaching them manners is it doesn't come naturally. None of us are generally wired to be polite and kind and think of others. We need to, that to be brought to our attention. So we can teach our kids. And I want to give you a list of some that are just simple, not rocket science, very simple. The challenge is for you and I, as parents, to be the model, to be doing this all the time. And so I encourage you to start small. And the first thing that we have just thought, this is really important to make life pleasant, let's just say. And that is to teach your children to say, please, thank you, excuse me, all the time. So here's the deal with habits, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's not a habit if you don't do it all the time. And so if I don't say, Chris, could you please get me a tissue? Hannah, could you please go put the sheets away in the cabinet? If I don't say please, and then and I get the tissue, thank you. And thank you for putting that up. If I don't do this on a regular basis, it's not a habit, and my children are less likely to pick it up. So oftentimes, we let all those kinds of things go until someone comes to our home and our child asks for something and we're like, oh, please say please, and the child doesn't say it and you say, huh? say please, or maybe the person says, they have what the child wants and they say please, and they're trying to help us. The point being, across the board, to teach our children, when you make a request for anything, you should say please. And when someone abides by your request, you should say thank you. And when you step on someone's toe, you knock their toy over, you tump over the milk, you say, excuse me. Everybody, mom, dad, kids, everybody. Because if we just reserve this for putting on the dog when our neighbors come over or when friends come over for dinner, which is generally speaking what we do, we don't pay attention to the little niceties, then our kids don't have a habit. And there's the theory that, well, I just really want them to feel it. Well, let me just tell you, no, you don't. You just want them to say it and say it and say it. And pretty soon you get accustomed to the nice flavor of being polite. And it creates just a more pleasant environment. So please, thank you, excuse me. And then lend a hand. Teach your kids to say, how can I help you? What can I do next? So I've just asked my child to, put the towels away, and they come back and I say, thank you. And my child says, what can I do next? Or in the beginning, I'm going to coach my child to learn to say, what can I do next? It's similar to if you get up from the table, you have a bunch of people over for dinner, we're sitting in here, someone comes into the kitchen and they say, I'm going to get myself some water, what can I get anybody? It's just preferring your brother. It is thinking of others' needs ahead of your own. So to teach our children to say, how can I help? What else would you like for me to do? And these, again, I'm talking about proactively teaching these things to our little ones. They're not going to do it all the time, but to proactively teach that expectation and, again, model in our homes preferring one another. How can I serve you? What can I do to help? And these are in no particular order except for the please, thank you, and excuse me. It's really a wonderful thing to teach our children to be a good sport. I don't know about y'all. Well, okay. I'm not a competitive person. So when there are games to be played at family dinners or, holidays or whatever, you don't want me on your team because I'm not going to take it as seriously as you might like to if you're a competitive person. And I always disliked team sports because if I wasn't very good and the team lost, then you know how kids do. They look at you because you dropped the ball or you whatever. So let's teach our children to be a good sport, be a good winner and be a good loser, because that's a life skill, that's, and people are watching, this all comes back to, it's not about appearances, except that it is about sullying the name of Christ. If we call ourselves believers, we go out into the world and we act like jerks and we're morons, then we, damage his good name. Leave it cleaner than you found it. Like the bathroom, like the kitchen, and a lot of these will dovetail into the 21 rules of this house if you're starting to use those with your kids. So when we take something out, we put it away. When we open something, we close it. When we make a mess, we clean it up. But the principle, leaving it cleaner than you found it, leaving it better than you found it. When you're out in the world, perhaps you've seen this. You go into a bathroom at a restaurant, and there's water all over the counter, and you lean over to get a towel, and your clothes are all wet. Well, and that's just laziness on the part of the person who came before you not to leave it cleaner than they found it. And this, again, is not something that we do naturally, but it is something we can teach our children to do. So while we're teaching them to wash their hands, we teach them to wipe up the sink because we leave it cleaner than we found it. We're preferring our brother. We're thinking about the person who comes after us. It's not my chore this week to clean the kitchen. That's sister's chore, so she can come do this. But we're just showing deference to one another. Knock on a closed door. So this is for you moms. Teach your children to knock on the door and wait for an invitation to enter. I'm always saddened by moms who tell me they can't go to the bathroom and they can't take a shower, and I think it ought not be so. You ought to be able to close the door and go to the bathroom by yourself, and you ought to be able to close the door and take a shower by yourself. And your children, the same. So one kiddo's is being potty trained, and they're, in the beginning throes of doing it by themselves, and another sibling barges in and invades their privacy. So teach your children to knock before they come into a room. And here's just one of my pet peeves. Again, these are in no particular order. Don't take more than you need. Again, this is about preferring your brother. So we're at a church potluck, and this happened to us a lot because we had a big family, so I would bring enormous quantities of food because there were so many of us. But there would always be another large family who would bring just some little, serves for kind of thing, and then load the plates up. And then the people at the end of the line, there's nothing for them. So teach our children and model for them, maybe portion size. You can always go back. So don't take more than you need. Don't take more tissues than you need. Don't take more towels than you need. Wherever you are, we want our kids to have in their minds, is there enough for the person coming after me? It's not about me. And wow, look there's 17 different kinds of cookies. I think I'll have 2 of every one. No, have a few. Make sure there's something left for the others. Make others comfortable. So I think in the very beginning we showed you our family goals, and one of them was to practice hospitality. So we invited people over to our house often, selfishly, because we wanted to help our kids practice interacting with people and practicing their manners, and then we wanted to have people in our home. But it's a really good place for your kids to practice in the comfort of your own home how to make others feel comfortable. When they have play dates, before the other children arrive, we coach our kids and say, okay, it's your job to make sure that our guests feel comfortable. You offer an idea for what to play. Would you like to go outside and ride bikes? I have an extra. Would you like to play Legos? We have a new set or whatever. And if we prepare our kids in advance, they begin, and I say this with confidence because I've said before, there was nothing special about Chris and I. We just did this stuff, and our kids were just normal sinners, just like everybody else's, and they learned to look out for the enjoyment of their guests when they came over. So when we had people come over, they always had a specific job, which is not to carry on some elaborate conversation with someone, but it was just, here's what you can do to help make sure your guest feels comfortable. Table manners. Again, this is about making the people around you comfortable. Have I overused that word? Yeah, because that's what all this is about. And so whatever the minimum standard is in your home, you decide that. And again, I'm not talking about the placement of things but basic table manners equips your kids to not be an embarrassment to others or offensive to others, and it equips them to be confident no matter where they go. They have the tools to know where that you don't just rip your food apart with your forks, you use a knife, and because it's easy when we're in the throes of parenting and people are legitimately eating with their hands. It's easy to just let that continue on because, well, it's just at home. But then they're not equipped when they leave your home or when others come to your home to be pleasant table partners, So teach your kids table manners, pre-teach them. We used to have, we always tried to have a funny consequence. And for various infractions at the dinner table, grabbing or talking with food in your mouth or whatever, we would just make them stand and eat, which is actually more of a challenge than it might seem. It was funny, and it was, because this is not something that warrants some major consequence, but so we tried to do lighthearted things, and that was one of the things that everyone thought was funny, was to have to stand and eat. Teach your children how to introduce themselves. And this is another reason that we would invite people to our home. And so recognizing some of the things we've talked about before, that some of our kids are introverts and some of our kids are not so keen on meeting people, and some of our children are very young. So figure out what your bare minimum is. In our house, we required they put their hand out and they look the person in the eye and they shake their hand and they say, "Hi, I'm Jack." They didn't have to carry on a conversation. They didn't have to ask the other person about themselves. But especially for our shy ones, the ones who didn't have trouble. They could just talk. But our shy ones, it's real easy to fall into the, she's just shy. And then we limit this kiddo's ability to interact with other people in their life. And so proactively teach them. And we would practice with one another. Stick your hand out, shaking hands, and looking people in the eye, and they don't want to, and no, look me in the eye. We're not going to get into some in-depth conversation, but and after they did it, it was, I think, very affirming for them because adults respond really well to a child who puts their hand out and can say, hi, I'm Beverly, hi, I'm Jack, whatever. Adults, so there's a real good payoff for the kiddos. But we have to proactively teach them this before the need arises. So church is a great place to practice the introductions. It's no different than if I were an actor or something and I was going to deliver lines, I need to hear myself say those lines so they're not foreign to me. And it's no different than that. Our children need to hear themselves saying those things, introducing themselves. So practice before you have people come. Respect other people's property. So as I've said, some of these are kind of dovetail nicely with the 21 rules of this house. The rule, we take good care of everything God has given us, obviously applies to your own things, but I am concerned when we allow little children to trash our own stuff or to trash someone else's stuff because, it's just an old beat up bike. It doesn't matter. It's just, this is my friend's and it's just it's a piece of trash. And it's not the object. It's the value of the person who owns the object that we respect. So we need to be teaching our children to respect others' property, and in doing so to respect the person because they are of infinite value. Maybe it is a dump of a bike or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the person who owns it that we need to have in mind. And hold the door. This is a lost art. Especially with COVID, different places I go, they have wipes out there. You're supposed to grab a wipe and open the door. So people have gotten into the habit of just holding it open because you think, oh, wow, we're filling our landfills with all these wipes. Here, I'm sure no one's going through that thought process. But hold the door and to teach your children. And again, I'm saying these just seem so simplistic and like, really, I left my home for you to come teach my children to hold the door. Yes, because these are the things we forget to teach them. And we forget to demonstrate. So remember I said in the very beginning with the please, thank you, and excuse me, we have to be doing all these things. Add them to your agenda. You and I have to be doing all these things to demonstrate for our kids. As I said, we're going to talk about habits. We want these to be habits so your child is walking out the door and they don't have to say, let's see, there comes a person. Wonder if they can carry those things. Should I open the door for them? Should I hold? Will it be awkward? Will I be standing here too long? Blah, 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 blah. Hold the door. Just grab the door, hold the door. For women, for children, for elderly people, hold the door. Just an extra bit of manners. Admit when you're wrong and apologize. Asking forgiveness. We get it wrong and apologize. And when we keep short accounts, it just makes life more pleasant. And they need to hear us saying that to our spouse. They need to hear us saying that to the other siblings. And they need to hear us requiring it of them. So admit you're wrong and apologize. And the last one I have down here is smile at people. And I just think, again, this is probably more directed at our children who are introverted and more quiet and less comfortable socially, don't even want to be out there socially. To smile at someone is to put everyone at ease. And remember, that's the whole point. We want to serve others by helping them to be more at ease, to feel better about the situation. So these were just little, like, Bev, did she just grab these out of thin air? And I think the answer is no, because we've said before, the Bible doesn't give us a lot of very specific things about parenting. Do this, do that, potty train at this age or whatever. But I want to read you this. This is Romans 12:10. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. So there it is, right there. The biblical principle for all these things is to think of other people. And frankly, I like to teach my children manners because it gets their eyes off of themselves and onto other people. And we live in a world that shouts, look at me, look at me, look at me. And to me, to teach children manners and how to behave with others is to get their eyes off of themselves. And the 21 rules, number 4, in this house we consider one another's interests ahead of our own. And if you and I went about our day with our children and required that our children do this, to consider one another's interests ahead of our own, we would automatically be doing these things. But sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what to do, which is why I just gave you some. Now, you'll probably add more. I can think of more that I would add. But things that fit your family dynamic, the age and development of your children, the goal being to honor your brother. So proactively teach and practice those things. So let's talk about executive skills. As I said, this is kind of it's an older buzzword, but it's kind of a buzzword for we want our kids to be successful in life. And I want my kids to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. That's what I want them to hear. And to accomplish the things God ordains for their life, they do need some skills. They do need to have manners, and there are some things that you and I can teach them that will help them to accomplish their purpose in life. And so I'm just going to read to you these executive skills. And I have some resources if you want to read more about them. Very concrete, not character truly related, but they play out in our kids' character. But let me just read them to you and define them for you. The ability to initiate something, to begin a project that you want to. Flexibility, ability to adapt or revise what your plans were. Attention, having sustained attention despite fatigue, distraction, or disinterest. Organization, maintain a system to keep track of life, stuff, appointments. Plan, create a roadmap to achieve something. What's next? What's the next step? Working memory, hold enough information in your head while performing tasks. Self-awareness, how am I doing? And by how am I doing, not how am I feeling, but how am I doing? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I achieving what I'm supposed to be achieving? Am I treating people with kindness and respect? How am I doing, And then managing emotions, knowing how to recover from disappointment, how to wait politely. So the experts have determined that kids who have these skills typically do well in life. Not the academics, obviously, depending on what you choose to do in life, that may or may not be it will be of varying importance. But these are not necessarily character traits, but skills we can practice with our children, skills we can teach our children to help them be who they're supposed to be. So let's talk about initiation and how it kind of dovetails into what our home life, habits, manners, those kinds of things. Initiation, beginning a project. So if we are teaching our children to ask once they've done something, what else can I do? How else can I help you? It's a precursor, if you will, to initiating projects on their own. We're getting them in the habit of forward thinking, right? We're setting that pattern. Flexibility, the ability to adapt and revise. So if there were a 21 rule that said, when things don't go my way, in this house, when things don't go my way, I don't have a meltdown. If we encourage and equip our kids to be flexible, and some of this comes with maturity. Obviously, a very young child is not going to be able to do these things to perfection in the beginning. It's a process of maturing, but to help our kids be flexible by not allowing a meltdown when things don't go their way, helping them to control themselves. Flexibility is a real plus in life. And attention, sustained attention despite fatigue, distraction, or disinterest. Okay, so chores, this is where you work on teaching your kids attention because they might be tired, they're probably going to be distracted, and they're probably going to be disinterested in whatever chore it is you're having them do. And practice helps us to focus our attention. If we learn that I have to straighten my room, despite the fact that I'm really not interested in doing that, if we help them to practice, it's putting aside their interests to accomplish the goal. We're equipping them for later in life. Organization, maintaining a system to keep track of life. So in a kid's world, organization can be as simple as, where do I put my jammies? Where do my socks go? Or where does mommy like for me to put the clothes? Maybe they're all in one place. Maybe they're just in a basket. It doesn't matter. But to establish places of organization in our kids' life teaches them to organize. We can mistakenly think that all these things just happen, that you mature and therefore you can initiate projects and be flexible and organized. But that's just not true for all of us. Some of us are wired that way and others of us are not. And so for those of us who are not, we can be taught these things. So when we are teaching our children, you put your toys away. When we get something out, we put it away. We are helping them to establish habits of organization. Planning, creating a roadmap to achieve something. What's the next step? When we've got activities going on, if we engage our kids in the process of, first we're going to do this, and then we'll have to get that, and then we'll be able to do the last thing. Modeling for them a process of getting to a goal. And working memory, holding info in your head while performing tasks. So my favorite practice for working memory is giving your kids multiple instructions. And so they get to practice, wait, what did she say? What am I supposed to do? So we would play games like I would give them 2 instructions and have them just go do it. And when they could successfully do 2 things, I'd give 3 instructions and see if they could do 3 instructions. And we played with this, like go to the kitchen and drink your water, sit in the chair, stand up and turn 3 times. And they are like, oh, okay, wait, what? You know, the point that works in their favor and our favor is we're teaching them to attend to what we say. We're teaching them to, we're expanding their ability to hold things in their mind for a longer period of time. Plus, you know, when you're doing silly things, it's fun. But those things are helpful habits because our kids who are going to struggle in this way are going to get used to not paying attention to the things they feel are not important. But they're children and they don't know what's important. So when we, you know, kind of embrace this idea that I'm teaching my kids to keep things in their head, to pay attention and to keep things in their head, sometimes we would have them repeat, I've just told you to do this and this. Now, what did I tell you to do? And they had to repeat back to me, you know, what it was they were going to do. The self-awareness, how am I doing? Self-awareness is such a valuable thing. Again, not this, am I feeling like I need some me time? I'm not talking about that at all. But for kids to recognize, wow, the other children have trouble playing with me sometimes. I might be being too rough. I might be being too loud. I might be in their space. To teach our children to be self-aware. So they're not self-aware. So you and I have to help them know, you know what? When you get this far from someone, it makes them uncomfortable. You need to back away a little bit. And when you're loud and you're very excited, it's overwhelming to some, so you need to tone it down. And they can then learn, because we're helping them to see this in themselves, to monitor themselves. Chris is my self-awareness person, because I have a really high energy. So when we're in a place and I'm like operating at an RPM that humans shouldn't operate at, he's like, turn it down, you know, and he means that to help me and those around me. Beth, you're killing them, you know. But it's something that we proactively should address with our kids. Pointing out how they can interact with others in a more successful way. So some of our kids, and I see this in my grandkids, some of them, they're just the kids everybody likes. But not all of our kids are going to be the kids everybody likes. Some of them are going to need some help, and they do need for us to proactively teach them. And then the last one that they talked about was managing emotions, which is recovering from disappointment, waiting politely, and home life and all the things we do as moms, going places, standing in line and waiting your turn, and sharing with siblings are all opportunities for us to practice managing our emotions and recovering from disappointment. I love it at Christmas when your child's been wanting something, and this happened to us this Christmas with Hannah. She'd been showing us pictures of things she wanted, and we decided that some other thing was a better gift. We got her a bike. She came out and was like, and she didn't pitch a fit or anything like that. And she probably said, "Thank you. Do you remember?" "I don't remember."
And then she turned and walked.
And she like this was a dud. Anyway, but it is helpful for our children, for us to help them learn to manage their emotions. And therefore, every time we allow a meltdown when things don't go their way, we're not helping them. We are in effect enabling that this is how you in fact react to disappointment, and that is not how you react to disappointment. Proactively thinking, I want to teach my children to manage their emotions, which, yes?
I just had a question.
Yes.
What would that look like with a 2-year-old?
Managing emotions?
Well, like if you tell them to do something, or you tell them to put up a toy and they pitch a fit.
Well, so that...
Because I know that they're still pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what a parent can do to help them with that.
So it kind of depends on where you are on the continuum of training. So I'll tell you what our scenario was. In the very beginning, all we had to use were words. We don't pitch a fit. That was all we had to do. That's all we used, because we were always reacting. And then when we learned about proactively teaching our children to obey, and then when we were certain that they knew the standard and were able to abide by that standard, then we had a consequence, whatever that consequence was. So I don't know where you are in that continuum.
Probably still working on the teaching part.
Okay. So when you're quite certain that she understands this is unacceptable, and even now there can be a consequence. It shouldn't be a big consequence if you're not certain that she knows. So here's the problem for you. If you inconsistently allow her to pitch a fit sometimes and it goes unaddressed, that just creates a problem. So the first step would be totally consistent in addressing this is unacceptable behavior, the pitching a fit. Things are not always going to go your way. This is unacceptable. Decide what your consequence is going to be, and then implement the consequence every single time. And then once they understand, once they're able to comply with what you're saying, and you have instituted some sort of consequence for what happens, then if they continue, then it is rebellion. As long as they are able. Rebellion is willful defiance. And in our home, that was dealt with by spanking. But you have to have done all the beginning stuff first, and the child has to be able to control themselves. Otherwise, it's not, like a tiny baby, it's not willful defiance. That's just, I'm a tiny baby and I lack the way to, control myself. In the very beginning, when I taught you about teaching your children to get your attention and teaching your children to appeal your decisions, all those were intended to show your children that you are the one who's in charge and they are supposed to obey you. That's what the Bible says. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. And so everything that we do, like you could step away from this issue and not worry about the fact that she's pitching a fit right now. Because if you feel uncomfortable with, oh gosh, I don't know, have we done enough training? I don't know, and I don't know what a consequence would be. I don't even want to think about that, blah, blah, blah. Back it up and start working on the proactive ways that you teach your kid you're in charge, if you will. Not because we're egomaniacs and we need little children to do our bidding, but because we're trying to establish authority. And if our children don't see that we're the authority because we ask them and require them multiple things throughout the day, then we're not the authority. Does that make sense? So the little things, like even the manners things, are imposing your instructions, your will, if you will, on your child, so they learn to submit their will to you. The goal for child training is to teach your children to control their will and align it with, God's principles, right? Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay. We're treading into that territory that no one wants to tread into, but we're going to get there week after next. So the last thing I wanted to talk about before we talk about habits and how this all relates is emotional quotient, which is opposed to intellectual quotient. So EQ as opposed to IQ. And EQ, as I said, is the ability to identify your own emotions and manage them and read other people's emotions and respond appropriately. So from a distance, you're driving along and you accidentally cut someone off, and they speed around you and they're gesturing and yelling, and they cut right back in front of you. If you have good EQ, you back your car off and you let them go, and you're just like, okay, I'm not going to engage in this. So some personalities are like, oh yeah, bring it on. I'm talking about the adult world here. And that accomplishes nothing. And so we need to help our children to learn to read the situation, to read their own emotions. You seem really agitated. What can we do? Do you want to go run around? Do you have you need extra energy output? But to help them recognize their own emotions, and then when they have play dates, to maybe rehearse afterwards conflicts that came up, to help them learn to see other people's emotions. This comes down to preferring our brother and getting along, and we have to learn to, and again, this is something your 2-year-old is not going to do, but you can begin the process. So don't hear this stuff and think, okay, that we're not there yet. We have to begin somewhere. We have to begin because it takes a while for our children to learn these things. So we have to begin. So you can begin when they're young, and teaching them, you're too rough with your friend and they don't want to play with you. How come so-and-so never invites me over? Well, you're too excited and you can't bring your energy down, and they are, uncomfortable playing with you. And those are helpful things. We think, oh, I can't say that. Well, yeah, you should. We should help our children learn to get along and be good pals. So all of this comes down to self-control, and self-control is one of the goals of parenting. We want our children to grow to maturity, and one of the evidences of maturity is self-control. And let me just read these scriptures to you. Self-control right here. Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it." The principle being, we deny our desires if they are not in line with what we should be doing. That's a principle of godly living, is probably what I'm wanting might not be in my best interest or somebody else's best interest. Let me read this one. This one I love. John 15:13. Let me back up to 12. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Again, self-denial, which requires that we be able to control ourselves. If we cannot control ourselves, we cannot deny ourselves. And our children learn to control themselves little by little when we put limits in their lives and require that they work within those limits. Let me read this last one. Philippians 2:5-11. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Okay, I had to read a little more because that was just really good. But the point being, if Jesus is our example, and here it says he was in very nature God and did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. He made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. The principle being to control ourselves for the benefit of others. That is the greatest act of love. For you and I as parents, the greatest act of love is to put our phone down, to get off social media, to turn the TV off, to put our book down, whatever, and begin to work these things in our children's lives. We're after habits. And the reason I say you got to put your phone down, you got to put your book down, you got to turn the TV off is because habits can be hard to create. So I want to give you some tips. Whether we're talking about manners, whether we're talking about expanding their attention span or learning to control their emotions, we want them all to be habits. We don't want to go through a process. Should I control my emotions right now, or should I just go off on my friend? Should I just pound my little buddy who just took my favorite Lego? We want them to just react and habit the right way, all right? So make it easy to succeed and hard to fail. So an example in our adult world, let's say that this year you said, I want to read more books. So you make it easier to succeed if you put books that you want to read everywhere you might park your behind instead of your phone. Like if you have a phone and a tablet and a laptop and whatever, put a book in those places. That would be a way to make it easy to create that habit, make it easy for you to succeed. The other side of that is to make it hard to fail. No, hard to fail. Easy to fail. Make it easy to fail. Set yourself up for success is what I'm getting. I'm not saying it right. Here's an example. Nothing wrong with TV. We just wanted our kids to play outside instead of watching TV. And for our own selves, we thought, you know what? If the TV's right there, we're going to watch instead of reading or playing a game or building Legos with the kids or whatever. So in our house, we had a TV for the longest time. It was about this big. And it was in a very inconvenient spot. And to watch it, you had to sit on the floor. And so everybody's like, oh, forget this. This is no fun, and so they would go outside and play. Now, again, this is not about TV is wicked and evil. This was just about we made it easy to succeed by making it inconvenient to do the thing that we didn't want them to do. So whatever habits you want to create, bear that in mind. So, for example, drinking water. I think we talked about this one week. I want to drink at least 2 liters of water every day. So instead of having in my planner the 8 little pictures of glasses that I have to mark off every time I drink one, I just fill a 2-liter carafe. It sits on the counter, and all day long I drink out of it, and I can at any moment look at it and see how much water I need to drink. So that's it removes the steps of going to find my planner. Or on my watch, how many have I drunk, whatever. How many have I consumed? It's just right there, okay? So I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but the principle is make it easy on yourself to succeed. So let's go back to the reading for an example. And sometimes we have to simplify even more. So I like to read, so it's not hard for me to read. But I do leave books everywhere because I will pick up my phone and, if I don't have books around. But for people who don't like to read, but who want to get in the habit of it or want to gain the knowledge, back it up a little further and tear a page out of the book. And you think, oh, you can't tear pages out of the books. Well, okay, wait, what's the goal? Is the goal to read? Or is the goal to have the intact book sitting on the shelf and no one ever looks at it? So if the way you read is to tear a page out and you take it with them, you put it in their lunchbox or whatever, that helps to make the habit easier to do. So this is an oversimplification of habits, but the point being, make it easy to succeed and make it more challenging, to fail. So another example, chores are an excellent place to work on habits, and habits are a means of exercising control over ourselves. because we just do them automatically. You know, most of us have the habit of brushing our teeth, combing our hair, putting our clothes on. We kind of have those habits, you know, because they work for us, and we don't think about it, and that's the goal. So maybe you want your children to learn to straighten their room or make up their bed before they leave. So make it easy for them. Case in point, our bedroom, you know, because when you get to be grown-ups, it's not enough to just have 2 pillows on your bed. You must have 8 or 9, because, you know, right? And a blanket at the end, and, you know, okay. So that makes it, and you know, you don't just like pull your blanket up, you have a comforter over that, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes we can do this with our kids. We have this beautiful room for them, and the child cannot maintain. So you want your child to make up their bed, make it easy for them. It's just a blanket and a pillow or whatever. And when they demonstrate their ability to do that, then you add all the decorative foo-foo animals and whatever. So make it easy for them to succeed. Connecting a new habit with one that you already do is a really helpful way to make the second habit stick. So, you know, back to the reading, and maybe if you have to tear out a page, leave it in the bathroom. That's a habit that most everybody does, and, you know, leave it in there. So I'm trying to think of something you might want your kid to do, and a habit that they already have. Little bitty ones like y'all have are relying on you and your habits, you know, to get their teeth brushed and their hair combed and those kinds of things. But even still, if you want them to do something, you tie it to what you're already doing. Like,
I have an example.
What? Go ahead.
So during bath time, our habit is that because we do bath at night, we now have the toothbrush, toothpaste, cup right there.
Very smart.
She already knows every night she takes a bath, and now it's become, let's do the teeth brushing at the same time.
Very smart.
Before it was like, oh, did we brush the teeth? And now we got, you know, and so
Yes.
now it's just a lot easier.
Yes. When you don't have to think about things, your life will be so much easier. When your children, and I promise you it can happen, your kids can learn habits, and the house just runs, and everybody kind of just does their thing, and without even thinking about it. And that's very smart. It really is a wonderful, freeing thing, because you know, you don't want to spend your days thinking, wait, did I brush their teeth? You'd rather spend your days, I'm assuming, thinking, let's read a good book, let's go to the park, let's play, you know, those kinds of things. Okay, so again, I just think that chores are a really good place to create habits. In our house, we did permanent chores, so we assigned, even the little ones, the little bitty ones would do things like gather the trash cans from various places and bring them to the kitchen and make up their bed, you know. But we would assign, as they got older, you can store this away for later, we would assign permanent chores for a year. And so that allowed them to become proficient, and it allowed it to become a habit. And I didn't have to think about, oh wait, today's Wednesday, who's emptying the dishwasher? It was someone's job the whole time. And it really took advantage of the power of a habit that you don't think about, you know. And start small. So you're not going to go home and you know, implement things across the board that are going to get everybody in habits, but you've already done one, and you've already seen, wow, when you make it convenient and you get out of your head, oh, but wait, the toothbrush and toothpaste don't go in there, so what, you know? It accomplishes the purpose. And so start small. My favorite place to start when creating habits is the please, thank you, and excuse me, and everybody does it, and you just get everyone in the habit of doing that one thing, and then you add, you know, something else into it. If you're, and like I said, some people are going to be, this is not going to be difficult for them. Others, it's going to be a little more challenging, so stack the deck in your favor. Couple of last principles. These are mom helps. Not necessarily related to the things we were talking about, but just mom helps that if it takes 1 to 2 minutes to do it then. So like, it's surprising how quickly you can actually fold a load of laundry. It just takes about 2 minutes. But when there's 3 of them sitting on your couch, it just seems like that's a 20-minute chore, you know, and then you don't want to do it. So a common get her done kind of rule is if it takes 1 to 2 minutes, just go ahead and do it. And then, and as I said, these are just mom helps. Something that needs to be done, figure out the first step that's required, and instead of writing, return the lights. I have a box of lights I have to return. Instead of writing on my to-do list, return the lights. The first thing I need to do actually is find the stinking receipt. So I write, find the light receipt, you know, and then that's done. Because return the lights means find the receipt, get the phone number, wait on hold, print the label, go to the UPS store, blah, blah. But I can find the receipt. And it's the same principle of breaking down things into manageable bits, like, you know, teaching please, thank you, and excuse me first. And it's that same principle. I just felt obliged to throw that in for you. And I reprinted, before we'll stop for a minute and let you all ask questions. I reprinted the resources from last week, and I wanted to make a comment about it, and I listed some resources, as I said, for this week. Some of the books listed for when we were talking about filling their bucket with love languages and gender differences and that kind of stuff are older. And I chose them deliberately because they're quite a bit simpler than some of the newer information that's out there. And I felt like if it's something that interests you, by all means, read the more complex stuff. But like the personality types, we talked about this. And I'm sure there's books now written for children, but in my personal opinion, that's way more than is necessary to get you going. So some of these are older, more simplified books that address some of the topics we talked about last week. And then for this week, the 3 books I listed, A Little Book of Manners, it's actually very feminine and it's for girls, which is great for you guys. But the reason I listed it is because it just has very simple manners and not more than, you know, you could really think about implementing right away. And then the other 2 books deal with executive skills, that initiative and planning and flexibility and attention and those things. And the reason I put them down is because they appear to be addressed for kids with a diagnosis of ADD. But I really like them, both of them, because they give you concrete ways to teach your children these skills. And one of them, No Mind Left Behind, actually says, it should look like this. It's more likely to look like this. But he shows you, so you can look at the 2 and go, oh yeah, I'm solidly in the we're doing it wrong camp, or, oh, look at me, we're doing it right. So he fleshes it out and shows you what it looks like. Again, the purpose not being to create these super kids who are going to achieve great things in the world. The purpose being to specifically and proactively be able to teach our children skills that will help them to be effective believers and to carry out God's purpose for their life. And we have to start when they're little. You don't wait. You know, we have to start when they're little.